So in Lab 3.2, we're actually going to introduce probably what is going to be one of the most important concepts that we learn in computer science, and that's the concept of writing our own functions. And in Snap, we're going to call those building our own blocks. So up until now, you've been writing code by using and dragging blocks that are already provided to you. These blocks in themselves are functions that are already written. They all do something. But in Snap, we have the ability to write our own functions by using the blocks that are already provided to us. So I want to give you a quick example of how we might be able to write our own function. So right here I have a program that uses the little dinosaur man here. And you can see that when the program's running, and we did this in class, he falls, he touches the ground, and if I press the space bar, he's going to jump up. And you can see how I've written this jump code. I have it change y by 1 and repeat that 20 times. So this should make him jump about 20 steps up. So let's say I wanted to make my own function that could make this character jump. To do that, I can just make my own block. And so if I right click on the screen anywhere, I have this option to make a block. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And the first thing you can see is that the first thing is I can pick what category my block should go under. So because I'm using this to make the person jump, I'm just going to put it in the motion category. And then I can give my own function or my own block a name. So I'm going to call it jump. And then I have three options down here. It can either be a command block, a reporter block, or a predicate block. And for this one, we're going to have it be a command block because we're going to command the sprite to do something. We're going to be telling the sprite to do something. A reporter block reports something out. So this is similar to X position, Y position, or direction, where you click them and they tell you what direction a thing's going or where it is on the screen. And a predicate block is the same thing. It reports out information, but it reports out a true-false value. So it reports out a Boolean. For the most part, we're going to be writing functions as command blocks, blocks that do something. So here's my command block called jump. And you can see once I do that, I'm given this block editor where I can write the code for jump in there. So all I have to do is rebuild this jump code inside my block editor. And actually, because I already have this code written, I can just drag it into the block editor. So now jump, well, the jump block is comprised of a repeat 20 and a change y by 1 block. I click OK, and you can now see that in the motion palette, I have my own function called jump. And so now I can just plop that here, and every time I press the space bar, the character will jump. And there he goes. So I've just built my own function called jump. Now this is very simple, and it doesn't really do much for us. One thing that it does is it makes it a little easier so that we could reuse code. So I don't have to go ahead and write out, if I go ahead and edit this block, I don't have to go ahead and write out repeat 20 change by 1. If I wanted to say have multiple characters that are capable of jumping, I don't have to rewrite this a million times. I can just quickly drag the block that I've made called jump and use that for other characters, right? But functions allow us to do something really, really special. And what they do is they allow us to reuse code but be able to change it every time we use it by having something called parameters. So parameters are inputs that we can provide to our functions to change up our functions as we use them. And the best way to explain that is just by doing an example. So in the case of jump, right now my jump script or my jump function has repeat 20 change y by 1. Well, let's say I wanted to make it so my character could jump different heights. So maybe at sometimes during the game he jumps 20, and then maybe let's say he goes to the moon. I want him to jump really, really high. I don't want to have to write a second jump function to change how high he jumps. So I can create a parameter in my jump function. And I'm going to call this parameter height. So I'm going to click the add button. I'm going to add an input. Input is another way for these parameters, right? I'm going to call it height. So now I have a parameter called height, and I can use that parameter in my function. So how do I change the height that this character jumps? Well, you can see the way I've written the code here. I change y by 1, and I repeat that 20 times. So the more I repeat this code, or the less I repeat this code, that will change how high he's jumping. If I repeat this 100, he'll go 100 up. So I can use height almost like a variable, but specifically for this function, I can place height in here. And what's going to happen is any number I give height will be placed here, and I'll repeat the block this many times. So when I click OK, you're going to see what happens. I now have my jump function, but it has a box next to it. and this box represents that parameter, height. If I go ahead and click edit, you can see height right there. So now I can put in any number for height, and it will go right here in the repeat block because that's where I told it to go. So when we pass something an argument, when we pass something into a parameter, we call it an argument. So let's say my argument was 10. I want to jump 10. That's going to trigger that repeat block to go 10 times, and I'll jump 10. Now let's say I pass in another number like 200. If I pass that, he's going to go 200 up. So now I can quickly change my function by just giving it different values here. So now he can jump 20, he can jump 200, depending on what number I put in the jump box. And that's the magic of really how a function can work. And a function can have tons and tons of different arguments that you could use for it, right? You can also work just the way that you have been with variables. You can pass variables as your arguments as well. So let's say, for example, maybe I wrote the program to go like this. How high do you want to be able to jump? So before the program starts, it's going to ask the player, well, how high do you want to be able to jump? And whatever number they tell me, I'm going to input that for jump. So let's say I play this game. I go, how high do you want to be able to jump? I want to be able to jump 100. And now 100 is answer. I'll jump 100. So you can do cool things like that as you develop your programs. So in Lab 3.2, you're going to be writing a program or writing your own functions to draw shapes. And so the first one here is just to take your script that draws a square. We've written that a couple dozen times. And turn it into its own custom block. Turn it into its own function. So let's just give that a quick try here. We already know how to draw a square. We can draw a square by moving a certain number of steps. Let's say it's 100 and turning 90 degrees, right? Oh, 90 degrees. And we probably want to do that in conjunction with the pen down. And we need to make a square, so we need to repeat that 4 times, right? So that draws a square right there. Let me get something to clear the ink. Keep that over because we'll need it. So let's say I wanted to turn this into its own function. Well, very simple. I'm just going to make my own block. I'm going to call it draw a square. It's going to be a command block, and I'll put it in the pen tool because that's what it's doing. It's drawing. And remember, I can put it in any category I want and just try to keep things that make sense. And now I can write the code to draw a square. So I'm just drag the code that I already have and click OK. And now I have a block called draw a square, and if I click that, it draws a square. I can clear it. Draw a square, and then I can clear it. Now let's say if I wanted to make this program a little more interesting, and you're going to do this in your lab. I also spelled square wrong, so I'm going to fix that really quick. Draw a square. There we go. Let's say I wanted it so the user could type how big they want the square to be, so they can control the sides of the square. So I'm going to add an argument to this called the size of, or let me call it side length. So the user will be able to type in the side length. And one thing that I want to do for my script, so really quick, where am I going to put side length? Well, the move right here determines how long the side length is, right? So I could just drag it here, and you can now see I have draw a square box. Changed up here, so now I could put in, let's say 300, and I get a square with sides 300, or I could type in, 50, and get a side 50, right? But if I was just shown this block, draw a square, and had a box next to it, I don't know what that box does. So when you make your functions, you're probably going to want to do this. You can add extra bits of text, and just make sure you're clear on what the parameters of your function do. So draw a square with length of sides, and then I'm going to leave it blank. So now when I look at this, draw a square with length of sides, and then I can type in the length of sides, 75. Just so I know what this box does, you want to be clear on what those boxes do, so when you go back to your function, you know what they do. So here's I draw a square, and that parameter can be passed any argument. so I can change the length of sides. So hopefully this gets you started on your own lab in making shapes. I think that'll be a big help. And have fun with writing your own functions. They're going to be a super important part of this course moving forward.